ever thought that, the big stories of history, empires, class, climate aren't just in books? That maybe they're hiding right there in the fat you use for your roast potatoes?
It's this sort of silent language of the kitchen, isn't it?
Exactly. The fat we choose to cook with is, well, it's one of the clearest expressions of a culture's entire identity.
It really is.
The material we got into this week was just incredible. It was this deep comparison of cooking fats across three huge culinary powerhouses: Ottoman, French, and English cuisine.
And the focus wasn't on recipes. Not really. It was about the philosophy,
Yeah.
the mindset.
Yes. Our mission for you, as you listen, is to see how these three cultures, often working with the very same ingredients, developed just radically different ideas about fat. We're looking for that cultural logic, what the source is called the akal.
And that idea, the account, that's really the key. The difference is they go so much deeper than just taste. We're talking about technique, durability, the
Yeah.
very foundation of how a dish is built.
So what's the big takeaway then?
You can actually boil it down to a single idea for each. For the Ottomans, fat was structure. It was the backbone, the omakase of the meal.
Okay.
For the French, fat was a very refined technical tool. And for the English, well, they were shaped by climate and industry, so fat was all about durability and energy.
Let's start with that Ottoman backbone. The philosophy there, it seems, was driven by two things right away: geography and, maybe more importantly, class.
That's right. They didn't just have one all-purpose oil. It was much more specific than that.
So if you were in the saray, the palace, cooking for the elite,
Yeah.
what were you using?
For the big dishes, pilafs, kebabs, complex meat preparations, the gold standard was a sadia, which is it's clarified butter.
And why clarified butter? What was the advantage?
It's about the technical needs of that kind of cuisine. Clarified butter has a high smoke point, which you need for those dishes, but the real value is its depth of flavor. It gives you this rich, rounded mouthfeel that just screams luxury.
Okay, but hang on. If they had this amazing clarified butter, why use anything else? Why did they need a whole different set of fats outside the palace walls?
And that's where class and geography come right back in. You step outside the capital, you go into Anatolia, and the needs are totally different.
Right.
Out there you find fats like kuruk yaya, that's tail fat, or suet. These were used in things like hearty stews, ayani, that needed to cook for a very long time, often over inconsistent heat.
So stability was key.
Paramount. It had to survive a long, slow simmer. And then you have the third major fat, olive oil.
Which you'd think would be everywhere, but it wasn't.
No, it was highly specialized. You saw it mostly on the Asian and Mediterranean coasts, and almost only in those amazing cold or lukewarm vegetable dishes, the zeytin.
So the logic is incredibly precise. Clarified butter for status and depth, animal fats for long cooking stews, and olive oil, but specifically when you want to highlight the raw aroma, not cook it to death.
Exactly. The main point here is that the Ottomans did not want a neutral fat. They matched the fat to what they saw as the soul of the dish. The fat was the structure.
That idea of structure is a really good bridge, actually, because if we jump over to France, the whole purpose just shifts. The Ottomans built the foundation with fat. The French, it seems, used it as a tool for refinement.
What's fascinating here is that the French weren't primarily concerned with how stable a fat was, but how manipulable it was.
And the foundation of all that is butter, right? Terroir.
Absolutely. Just think of the classic sauces beurre blanc hollandaise. Butter is the mechanism for balancing acid and fat. It's all about emulsification, protection, that signature richness.
But what about butter's low smoke point? You can't really sear a steak in it without it burning immediately. That must have been a huge limitation.
That's a brilliant question, and it gets right to the heart of the philosophy. Because butter is so unstable, it forced French chefs to treat fat less as a primary cooking medium.
And more as a finishing tool.
Exactly. A finishing and refining component.
Yeah.
They used its instability to their advantage, to create emulsions, to bind liquids, to add that last-minute gloss of richness.
So they had other fats for high heat, I assume.
Oh, of course. Specialized fats like duck fat, prized for confit, for potatoes.
Yeah.
It allows for this intense internal frying, maximizing flavor. But even there, it's about achieving a very specific, very controlled texture.
So olive oil was basically a regional specialty, like in Provence.
Precisely. The French turned fat into this tool for creating sophisticated textures and the sauce bases that define their whole technique. It's all very methodical.
Okay, so that brings us to England. We've had structure, we've had technique. With England, it feels like we're moving into pure practicality.
We are. It's shaped by a cold climate and later the Industrial Revolution. The priority shifts to stability, high energy, and frankly, affordability.
Maximum durability.
Food that will stick to your ribs. And you see that immediately in their staple fats. We're talking dense, caloric animal fats.
And the king of those is beef dripping, the Dana yeah yeah.
Yes. Essential for the classic roast beef, for chips, for potatoes. It can handle incredibly high heat, and it gives everything this savory, almost meaty flavor. It's just robust.
And for baking, it had to be lard. The muziayu.
It had to be. If you wanted that characteristic, flaky, crisp, what the sources call a cookier texture in your pies and pastries, lard was the only way.
And that texture wasn't just for fun, was it?
No, not at all. A pie was a portable container of high-calorie food for a factory worker. Lard's crystal structure creates that flakiness, which makes the pie hearty, but also sturdy enough to travel.
So the English logic is dead simple. Frying and roasting. You need animal fat for the high heat. Dough. You need lard for the texture and durability.
Exactly. And olive oil, unlike in the Ottoman world, really only showed up much, much later. It just wasn't necessary for their core philosophy.
So we have these three totally different approaches, but the real test, the real insight, comes when you ask, what happens when all three meet the exact same ingredient?
This is the absolute core of it. The single product experiment with a potato. That's the key. They took the same potato, cut the same way, and cooked it with the signature fat and technique of each culture.
And it shows how the fat just dictates everything. So let's start with the Ottoman method. Seria, clarified butter. What do they do?
The Ottoman usulu is a gentle process. They slow cook the potatoes in a pot, low to medium heat, lid semi-covered. The result?
Soft, I'm guessing.
Incredibly soft. They melt in your mouth. The clarified butter slowly penetrates the potato, becoming part of its internal structure.
Wow. Okay, now for the French. France's usulu, duck fat. A totally different game, I imagine.
The ultimate expression of technique. The potatoes are usually pre-boiled, then blasted in a super hot oven, like 220 Celsius. The fat is being used to manipulate the surface.
And the result of that shock cooking.
It's incredible. You get a glass-like crisp exterior, but the inside is perfectly creamy. The duck fat maximizes that Maillard browning reaction specifically to create texture. It's all about that elegant contrast.
Okay, finally, the English method. Ingélisse usulu, beef dripping.
This is all about heat and impact. The dripping gets screaming hot in the tray. Then the potatoes go in to shock them in the fat before roasting.
And the texture.
A thick, dense, almost hard crust. The flavor is rich, meaty. This potato isn't built for elegance or softness. It's built for energy and satisfaction. It's substantial.
It's amazing. The same potato, but you get three completely different outcomes based purely on the fat and the technique. Ottoman softness, French crispness, English density.
Right. And there's real science behind this. It's not just a matter of preference.
So what's happening on a chemical level?
Well, first, all those animal fats carry heat more stably. But more than that, the specific fatty acid profile of, say, duck fat versus beef dripping causes the starches in the potato to, well, to sugarize and brown differently.
It's chemistry reinforcing history.
Exactly. And that's why this modern idea of a neutral oil is so strange from a historical perspective. For these cultures, the fat was the character. It wasn't just a way to transfer heat.
Which brings us to what the sources called the big contemporary mistake. Using the same neutral fat for everything.
You lose all that historical depth, all the complexity that these cultures perfected by matching the fat to the outcome, whether that was structure, technique, or just pure durability.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, this knowledge allows you, the listener, to look at any recipe and sort of decode it.
Yes. You can understand the cultural philosophy behind it. When a chef calls for butter at the end, you know they're thinking like a French chef, focusing on finishing. If they use suet, they're building for endurance. It gives you the mindset, not just the steps.
That really is the takeaway. We've seen how three cultures used one simple thing, fat, to express their entire history, their climate, their social structure. It's an edible history lesson.
And to leave you with a final thought, I think the source's last line on that potato experiment says it all.
What was it?
We ate the same potato, but we tasted three different histories.
3 histories in one bite? That's something to think about. I mean, if this applies to potatoes, imagine how it applies to other shared ingredients like bread or pilaf.
Or maybe it explains why so many modern chefs are going back to these old-school animal fats. The past, it turns out, isn't just history. Sometimes it's just the best way to cook.